Opals and Bononos was always my favorite variation of that song because
Yeah.
opals are
I
a
like
thing
Opals
and
and
Bononos
Boninis.
are too.
I like Opals and Boninis.
Opals and Boninis.
Opals and Boninis?
That
Get
one's
out of here with
tricky.
that. Yeah,
Yeah.
no one wants that. I think I is the worst vowel.
It's kind of more than one, isn't it? That's an interesting thing about it, right? I believe that's
Yeah,
called
they
is
all
that
are.
called a diphthong? When you have more than one vowel sound and they blend together. So you have I,
Yeah.
I. Why is that its own thing?
Can I see that diphthong?
I remember that song. Diphthong, 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 diphthong.
Yeah,
That's what it
exactly.
was about. Was that Nelly? I think
Yeah,
that was Nelly.
exactly. Okay, everybody. So we have a quasi mailbag.
Yep, quasi mailbag here from
Yep.
Will. Here's what Will says. Hey y'all, random question I haven't managed to find a good answer for. I used to play, but it's been about a decade. I'm getting back into it and want to build a set of pipes specifically for solo competition. What difference does bore size have on sound, and what should I be looking for a purpose-built competition bagpipe? Thank you.
Okay.
Something
Is that the
I had
question?
not thought of before. That's the whole question. Yep. So he seems to
Okay,
be
good.
specific about bore size, but also generally, what should I be looking for a purpose-built instrument? This is
All
for
right,
solo competition.
hold that thought on bore size. All right, so don't let me forget to talk about that. But let's talk about, so first of all, a little background for listeners. So this is common. So sometimes what'll happen is you'll be playing your bagpipes, going along, doing your own thing, and then one day you'll decide that you want to solo compete.
Mhm.
Or maybe you do some solo competing and you come to the conclusion that it would be easier to have a second instrument that was set up specifically for solo competition needs. I think the thinking behind that, I have two sets of pipes for sure. One for solo style playing and one for band style playing. They often kind of require different styles of setups and stuff as well. But that's the idea here. So this person is thinking about getting a second set that's devoted for that specific idiom, right, of solo competing, as opposed to maybe their parade piping and their casual piping and maybe their band piping. It would be different.
Yeah.
So that's the background here. The first thing I would like to say is that sometimes it seems like a no-brainer that you should get a second set of pipes going for a certain purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And even though you thought it was a no-brainer, it turned out to be a major brainer.
A major brainer. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So, and it's one of those things where once you get a second set of pipes going, so this is just a casual warning on this topic.
Mm-hmm.
Once you get a second set of pipes going, you have to keep a second set of pipes going. And sometimes the cost of that is far higher than you recognized at the time. I have two sets of pipes, one for band and one for solos, but I seldom have both my sets going at the same time. And my bagpiping life is very weird and at least temporarily kind of allows for that. But keeping two sets of pipes going takes twice the amount of time as keeping one set going, at least sort of, that's true.
I can imagine this maybe being especially rough if when you're thinking about a solo set, you're thinking sheepskin bag and cane reeds, the things that require regular use to stay in good shape.
But they all
and
do,
stuff
though.
like that.
The devil's in the details, and all the bagpipes that you play are going to require ongoing maintenance and care and thought. And so sometimes what you find is by getting the second set of pipes going, your overall approach gets worse in both areas, right? So it's my band pipe is now worse because I have to divide my time between my band pipe and my solo pipe. And then the reason I got my solo pipe was to develop this amazing solo instrument, which hasn't materialized because I also have to keep my band pipes going. So the first thing I would say is with a few slight tweaks to your approach, you can achieve a great solo bagpipe and a great band bagpipe using the same bagpipe. So my first advice here is consider not setting up a whole new instrument and instead consider creating two setups out of the same instrument. Okay. And I did this for years. So when I played in the SFU pipe band as a youth, sort of a youth, I was in between the ages of, let's say, 16 and 22 or 23 or something like that. I played in the SFU pipe band and I played solos in the morning at all the games. And then I played in the band in the afternoon. Professional solos, very high level band. But for the longest time, I did not have two sets of pipes. I played solos in the morning on the same set of pipes that I played in the afternoon. And I just made a couple of tweaks to the way I approach things that really allowed me to do it. The main thing was I had a solo chanter that was different from my band chanter, but it still fit into my single set of pipes. And then I had two sets of drone reeds, one that was sort of set to go really well with my solo chanter, and one set that was set to go really well with my band chanter. Okay. And that avoided the problem and the added complexities of keeping a second instrument going. If that
So a
makes
set
sense.
of reeds and a chanter.
Yes. And so before I would ever encourage someone to get another set of pipes, I would encourage them to at least explore the idea of just getting another chanter going and another set of reeds going first and seeing if that solution could work, because keeping one set of pipes going is way better in the grand scheme of the universe than having to keep two complete sets going.
Maybe might as well start with that for so many reasons. One of them being that, like, then if you decide you do want to go with a complete second instrument, just add drones in a bag and you're there. It's not like you'd be wasting your time or money on these things.
Yes, exactly. And a lot of us find that we're short on time. Maybe this person is, maybe they're not. But if you're short on time, adding a second instrument's not going to help anything. It's going to make it worse.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah. And even if it is a synthetic bag and you quote unquote don't need to do maintenance on a daily basis, you do need to do maintenance on a daily basis, right? Now you might find you at least need to do your checks. And what you'll find is hemp is changing shape all the time, even on your synthetic setup, right? Things are different. If you're playing moisture control systems on your second set, that's more maintenance than a natural hide setup because you're nuking your rocks all the time. And even on the days you don't nuke them, you're wondering the whole time if you should have nuked them.
Yeah.
Right. And so it gets complex and you're worried if your hoses are leaking and so on and so forth. And then if you're not worried about if your hoses are leaking, that sort of points to the question that you didn't really need a second set of pipes, right? You could have done it all in the first one. So that would be my first little piece of advice. And by the way, it's very closely related to the episode we recently recorded about simple tools. Don't make things more complex if you can possibly avoid it, would be Uncle Andrew's advice to you.
Yeah. We don't have to go and like basically repeat the episode, but there was also one that we did a year-ish ago about solo chanters specifically. And I really like remembering that it's the one time that I have ever seen your mother comment on one of our episodes. Because our conclusion was like, if you call it a solo chanter, that makes it a solo chanter. But really, it's not actually a thing. You don't really need one. And she was like, excuse me. How many solo chanters did I buy for young Andrew? I demand a refund.
Yeah, I should probably pay her back. Yeah.
That was pretty funny.
As a matter of fact, I still have most of those chanters here. I can see the nail chanter that we bought still there.
Yeah.
That chanter knows a thing or two because it's seen a thing or two. I'll tell you that much. But yeah, a lot of the chanters are still there. Yep. So my first bit of caution there would be look before you leap and don't leap. Don't leap if you can avoid it, would be my general advice. However, for some people, getting a second set of pipes going, that's their idea of the most possible fun you could ever have. And they have budget space and they have lots of time in their schedule. And it just makes them excited and happy to be playing pipes to have a second set. And so you can override that advice. And in some cases, it's probably appropriate. But as far as your actual bagpiping success, I would encourage you to not get a second set right away and go with the chanter and the drone combo. Okay, let's move on. What were the other elements of?
Well, they got specific.
What was the other elements of
Will got specific about asking about bore sizes. And this is something that I think your advice is absolutely spot on and useful for sure. I do think Will might be leaning toward solo piping exclusively and thinking like, so if I'm going to be like diving into solos, what kind of setup should I have to sound great? Maybe is the thrust there. Is there any advantage of one thing versus another when I stand in front of a judge?
Yeah. And we're talking about bore size or not?
He did bring up bore size, but I get the feeling from the overall question that he's just curious about it in general, like how do I build a good bagpipe for soloing?
Sure. Let's do the bore size thing. And I can just give you my take on it. So I've met a few people in my travels that are obsessed with bore size. Like maybe I could count them on one hand. And then everyone else I've met, which includes the vast majority of the world's best pipers, right, are in this group of the vast majority of people that I've ever met. have never given bore size more than just a fleeting thing. Not that they're ruling it out. Maybe different bores are optimal and slightly better. And I do know some people who do play pipes, and they'll let you know, when you talk to them, it'll be like, oh yeah, my 2 tenor bores are actually different. So they're aware that they're different. I'm not sure if we know the exact specs or not. And so there's lots of little rumors and whisperings out there that bore size has some sort of relevance to the sound. And by the way, I think it must have some kind of relevance to the sound.
Yeah, makes sense.
But it seems like it's very much an issue of minutia, probably a lot of subjectivity. It would be an extremely difficult thing to measure. And so I personally would put no thought into what bore size I'm working with.
That's maybe like the very last tiny little detail.
And probably not even that.
Maybe
There
even
might
that.
be some trial and error. A cool thing to do someday. Yeah, I was like, let's go to McCallum and ask him to make me some different size stocks and then switch them in and out and see if there's any noticeable difference. But like, yeah, that would be pretty far down the road. I could tell you with a fair degree of confidence that none of the top players are thinking heavily about bore size. By the way, if I'm wrong about that, I wouldn't be surprised, but I'm pretty sure I've never really heard of it. Maybe it's a top secret they're keeping close to the vest.
That's right, yeah.
I
They've
chatted with
found
Lincoln
the-
Hilton in the tuning algorithm course. I did all the tuning interviews, and Lincoln and I got to talking a little bit about bore size. He's kind of into it. And it was very interesting. And he's certainly convinced that the bore size can play a major role. So he would be one of the people on one hand that I've talked to about it. Might be interesting to talk to him again.
Yeah. It'd be interesting to talk to Lincoln Hilton about a lot of things, that's for sure.
I know. He's on my list of people to bring on the podcast. By the way, I met someone last weekend who was like, I love the podcast. When are you bringing the guests back on? Because I used to do conversations with guests one-on-one. So Jim, we have to do it. The problem is,
it's fair.
It's just like,
The
it
people have had
reminds me
enough.
of, it's the same as having a second set of pipes. It's like, it's just way easier to have one guest than two. To have one guest every time, the same people, it's much easier. So maybe we've been lazy, Jim. So we're getting on it. We're going to have guests.
Absolutely.
2025 will be the year of the guests.
The year of the guests. That sounds like a solid plan, especially if one of them is Lincoln Hilton. That'd be fun. But Andrew, you have way more experience than I do with this. So I'm speaking from very limited experience myself. But it seems to me like my drone sound is hugely affected in interesting and exciting ways by changing the reeds that I'm using.
Yeah.
And that maybe is going to have a bigger effect and is a cheaper thing to experiment with. And so maybe that's the place to start.
Yep, absolutely. And by the way, just what bag you play has a huge role in how your drones sound. And what gadgets you use has a huge role. So there's so many of these, right? Or don't use, exactly right. Yep. So a lot of those things are interesting things you can experiment with in the meantime. Okay, let's pretend you are going to set up a solo bagpipe. I think a big part of this question is, what should you do?
Yeah. Where do we start? What makes it good? I think that there's an understandable feeling that the workhorse set of bagpipes that's very generic is great for band, but I want something unique that'll stand out for my solo playing. Yeah.
The thing that's going to stand out in solo playing is the same as the thing that would stand out in most other types of playing. You want your pipes to be really good and sound really good, and then that'll stand out. It depends on what level you're at. Okay, well, sort of, but in general, and again, it's a direct tie into a recent episode about simple tools, right? Your solo setup is no different than other setups in the sense that you want your setup to be as simple as it can possibly be. So, and a lot of people, it might be, maybe you even take lessons with a top player. And those top players are using some gadgets inside their pipes, usually, like the moisture control systems of some kind. And remember, even though that's complex relative to what you might be used to, and it seems like gadgets might be the way forward, remember that those guys are using gadgets very cautiously and at great cost, right? In the sense that it adds a lot more time and effort and thought process and troubleshooting when things go wrong, et cetera. And by the way, usually a detrimental effect on the overall quality of the sound, but that's a calculated risk that the top players are making to ensure that their drones don't go even the slightest teeny weeny bit out of tune, right? And so for them, that's appropriate. And for them, that represents the simplest possible configuration they can go with in order to maximize their chances of success.
Yeah.
If most people are starting solos in grade 4 at the entry levels, that gadgetry and complexity is absolutely not necessary. Absolutely. absolutely, absolutely not necessary. And in my opinion, we should be going at that level with the simplest viable set of tools we can go with, which will probably be something like 3 drones, a chanter, and a blowpipe hooked up to a pipe bag with simple reeds. It's going to look something like that. Maybe it's a hide bag, maybe it's a synthetic bag, but you don't need all the crazy gadgets and you don't need anything fancy. You need to take the simple thing out and you need to slay. That's what you need to do.
Yeah.
You got to get out there and you got to slay. You got to pick the instrument that's going to allow you to slay.
Yeah. Now you need to come up with an acronym like the SLAY can stand for something about quality of playing or something like that. Yes. Go slay.
Slay. Subtlety.
Man, L is a hard one.
L is a tough one. Subtlety. Liquidity.
Liquidity. There
Acidity.
You go. Nice.
Maybe you don't even need the Y. You just pronounce slot like slay. Or yes. That could work.
It just occurred to me, Andrew, that there might be a clever thing lurking right here in front of us that you could say the ideal bagpipe setup is right there in the label. Bagpipes.
Yes.
A bag and pipes, and anything more than that, think real hard about it before you add it in there.
Yep. Yep. I would be surprised. It would be interesting. It would be interesting. But I think all of us who play the moisture control systems in our solo piping battle axe slaying weapon, right? I think all of us wish we didn't have to.
I see. Yeah.
I certainly do. It's complicated and annoying. And when you take them out, the drones sound better. And man, you really, really, really wish you didn't have to use it. So just keep that in mind, folks, right? Maybe not. I think there's some people who, they've had so much success with their setup that they're rightfully proud of how it works. And so they like to spread the gospel of how their system works. So maybe there are people who are actually happy to hook those things into their pipes. But I think most of us kind of wish there was a better way, I think.
So then maybe
we might find out if not, but.
Like you've said several times, that's okay. Let us know. Hop in the comments. But if we were going to boil down the answer to Will's question here, what should I be looking for in a purpose-built competition bagpipe? Would it be something like the simplest setup you can possibly have to achieve solid sound? I mean, that's maybe more generic than he wants to hear, but maybe that's it.
Totally. Yep. And start with that and refine it from there. Like most of us are not, I don't think anyone starts the solos at the professional level, right? So you start in grade 4 and you might get feedback. Your sound is dull and not that interesting. It's like, cool. So now you have to make a change. And so what kind of change can you make to make your bagpipe less dull and more interesting? And you can think about that, right? And you can make changes from there. So maybe year 1, you have a synthetic bag and just the basics, and you go out there in the solos and you get feedback, and maybe eventually you get enough feedback like, okay, maybe a hide bag would be the way to go. So you can strap one of those on. And then eventually it's like, let the problems present themselves to you one at a time. And then you do your trial and error from there and you come up with it. And what you'll probably find is in the higher levels, dealing with moisture becomes enough of a problem and it's enough of a detriment that you'll start to have to do more interventionist style things to keep the moisture off the reeds, to continue to give yourself a chance to be competitive and go from there, and only add complexity when it's really necessary. If I had a student that was getting started on the solos, it would be maybe a hide bag. By the time you're playing in the solos, you're probably a good enough player to handle it. So a hide bag, so you get that richness and that resonance and that stability. Some simple reeds, probably easy drones, but I personally am always comfortable with a canard or something or whatever. But yeah, probably some easy drones and something like that. And then maybe a water trap, but that's all you're going to need. And then you just need to slay, right? Like you need to go out there.
Say it with me, folks. Remember what slay stands for?
Yes. Smooth liquidity.
That's good. Yeah.
Acidity. Yes. That's
Dude, you remembered. I genuinely didn't remember. So I was just joking around. Nice.
There you go. My mind is like a steel trap. But that's really all you need. And then you just need to slay. I think a lot of people miss that detail. So like, oh man, my bagpipe setup, it's like, I really think I need to do this, and I really need the moisture control. It's like, whoa, hold on a second, buddy. Your score sheet is referencing 17 crossing noises, major rhythmic issues. You made a huge note mistake in the third part, otherwise known as you're not slaying, bro. And so it's not the setup that's holding you back in the solos usually. Very rarely is your bagpipe setup holding you back in the solos. It's that you need to slay, right? So stay simple, keep it simple. And then Enjoy the music, play the music, get the lessons, soak it up, try this and that, play a lot. Just play a lot. Just do a lot of playing. Keep playing it. Get to the point where you can slay. That's the real thing. Pick an instrument that's short, sweet, easy. Again, if you have a second instrument, that means you're spending more time keeping two instruments going and less time just playing and slaying.
Playing and slaying. Man, it's really getting good.
Slaying. That's what you got to do in the solos, folks. You got to get out there. You got to slay. 9 times out of 10, especially in the lower grades, if someone shows up and slays and their pipes go out of tune, they're going to beat the person who doesn't slay and has like this perfect pipe that stays perfectly in tune. Because judges are looking for the slaying, the smoothness, liquidity, acidity, that yes factor.
The yes factor. And if you want to slay, you got to play. That's the main thing.
That's right. That's right.
So
when you
whatever
play,
set
you got to slay.
Play it.
When you play, you want to slay. And then in order to slay, you got to play.
You got to play.
You got to do it. So there you go. That's a short and sweet episode. Just a couple of thoughts about that solo pipe conundrum. And don't overthink it would be my advice. And then if you enjoy overthinking things, maybe do overthink. But just remember that sometimes I think we enjoy overthinking things and we get hooked on overthinking things because we know we're not slaying. And we're kind of avoiding getting to the crux of the issue. I know a lot of people who could just take their band bagpipe, walk into the solos, and they'd be slaying right away because they're great players. And you wouldn't need any kind of different instrument at all. And as a judge, would I say like, it would be nice to have a smoother instrument here and not be blasting me with your band bagpipe? Yeah, I might write that on the sheet, but you still got first with an above grade level because you're slaying.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
You got the smoothness.
Yeah.
You got the liquidity. You got the acidity. At the end of the day, that's a yes for me.
That's a yes. So the slayers are the players. The ones who've been playing are the ones who go out slaying.
But remember, you can't really slay until you play. So it's sort of a circular thing. Yeah.
Right.
All joking aside, it was a great question. And just those were a couple of thoughts.
Hey, everybody. Andrew Douglas here from the Piper's Dojo. And I just want to say thanks so much for listening to today's iteration of the podcast. If you enjoyed what you heard here today, it would be super helpful to us and to a lot of bagpipers out there trying to find us. If you could give us a top-notch review on whatever platform you're using to listen to this podcast, particularly Apple, iTunes, and Spotify and things like that, your review would be really, really helpful. So if you have a moment today, definitely go over there and help us out. Other than that, until we meet again on the podcast or somewhere else, thanks again for listening.